The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty trail when Sarah first heard the thundering hooves approaching their wagon train. She sat quietly beside her mother on the wooden bench, her fingers tracing the familiar patterns of her worn quilt, while the rhythmic creaking of wheels filled her world with sound. At 17, Sarah had learned to read the world through her other senses, and something in the sudden tension of her mother's breathing told her that danger was coming. "Sarah, get down," her mother whispered urgently, but it was already too late. The bandits came like a storm across the prairie, their horses kicking up clouds of dust that Sarah could taste on her tongue. She counted at least 8 riders by the sound of their mounts, maybe more. The wagon train had only 5 families, with barely a dozen men capable of fighting. Sarah's father grabbed his rifle from beneath the driver's seat, but the attackers were already upon them. "Nobody has to die today," called out a gruff voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Just hand over your valuables and we'll be on our way." Sarah felt her mother's hand grip hers tightly. Through the chaos of shouts and crying children, she could hear her father's voice, steady but strained. "We don't have much, but take what you need. Just don't hurt the women and children." "That depends on how cooperative you folks are," the bandit leader replied with a laugh that made Sarah's skin crawl. The next few minutes passed in a blur of terror. Sarah heard the sounds of trunks being opened, belongings scattered, and horses stamping impatiently. She smelled the acrid scent of fierce sweat mixing with dust and leather. Her mother held her close, whispering prayers under her breath. "Well, well," came another voice, younger and crueler than the first. "What do we have here?" Sarah felt rough hands grab her arms, pulling her away from her mother despite her protests. "Please," her mother cried. "She's blind. She can't hurt anyone. Please leave her alone." "Blind, you say?" The young bandit's voice was filled with a twisted curiosity. "That's interesting, real interesting." Sarah's heart pounded as she was dragged forward. She could hear her parents pleading, her father offering everything they owned in exchange for her safety. But the bandits seemed to have found something more valuable than gold or silver in their defenseless daughter. "Boss," the young bandit called out. "This one might be worth something special. There's folks in the territories who pay good money for unusual merchandise." The wagon train families gasped in horror at the implication. Sarah's mother let out a wail that cut through Sarah's heart like a knife. She tried to break free, but the bandit's grip was iron strong. "You can't take my daughter!" her father shouted, and Sarah heard him take a step forward. The click of a gun being cocked stopped him dead. "I wouldn't if I were you, old man. Your daughter's coming with us, and that's final. Consider it payment for your lives." The bandit leader's voice was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather. "Jake's right. A blind girl? There's collectors who'd pay handsomely for something like that, especially one this pretty." Sarah felt sick to her stomach. She had heard whispered stories of such things, but never imagined she would become part of one. Around her, she could hear the other families crying and praying, but no one dared to challenge the armed men. "Please," Sarah found her own voice at last. "I'll slow you down. I can't ride. I can't see where I'm going. I'll be nothing but trouble." "Oh, you won't be riding, sweetheart," Jake laughed. "We've got a nice, comfortable wagon for you, all to yourself." The next hour was a nightmare Sarah would remember for the rest of her life. She was bound hand and foot and thrown into the back of a rough wooden wagon that smelled of tobacco and unwashed bodies. Through the canvas cover, she could hear her parents calling her name, their voices growing fainter as the bandits rode away with their prize. The wagon lurched and bumped over the uneven ground, each jolt sending pain through Sarah's already aching body. She tried to keep track of direction by the sun's warmth on her face, but after several turns and what felt like hours of travel, she lost all sense of where she was. Her captors talked freely around her, apparently unconcerned that she might overhear their plans. From their conversations, Sarah learned that they were heading to a trading post called Devil's Canyon, where they had contacts who dealt in human trafficking. The leader, whom the others called Morgan, spoke of Sarah as if she were livestock being brought to market. "Blind ones are rare," Morgan said during one of their brief stops. "Exotic. There's a man in California who collects unusual slaves for his ranch. He'll pay top dollar for something like this." Sarah's blood ran cold at the casual way he discussed her fate. She thought of her parents, probably still following the wagon train west, not knowing if they would ever see their daughter again. She thought of the little cabin they had planned to build, the garden her mother wanted to plant, the new life they had dreamed of in Oregon Territory. As night fell, the bandits made camp beside a small creek. Sarah was dragged from the wagon and tied to a tree, given a small portion of beans and water, while the men sat around their fire drinking whiskey and playing cards. She listened to their conversations, learning their names and habits, storing every detail in her memory. Jake was the youngest and cruelest, always looking for ways to torment her. Morgan was the leader, cold and calculating, treating Sarah like a business transaction. There was Pete, who seemed uncomfortable with the whole situation but too afraid of the others to speak up, and several others whose names she hadn't caught yet. "How long to Devil's Canyon?" Jake asked as they settled down for the night. 3 more days if we push hard," Morgan replied, "and we will push hard. The sooner we get rid of this merchandise, the better." Sarah closed her eyes and tried to shut out their voices. She had 3 days to figure out how to escape, though she had no idea how a blind girl alone in the wilderness could possibly survive. Still, anything was better than the fate that awaited her at Devil's Canyon. The second day brought new horrors. The bandits seemed to take pleasure in describing the terrible things that would happen to her once they reached their destination. They spoke of the slave markets, the brutal men who bought girls like cattle, the lives of misery that stretched ahead. But Sarah also began to notice something else. During their stops, she heard other sounds in the distance, the calls of birds that didn't quite sound right, the snap of twigs in patterns that seemed too regular to be natural. Someone was following them. At first, she thought it might be her father and the other men from the wagon train, but the sounds were wrong for that. Too quiet, too careful. This was someone who knew how to move through the wilderness without being detected. On the third day, as they approached what Morgan said was the final stretch to Devil's Canyon, Sarah's mysterious follower made his presence known. It happened during their midday rest. The bandits had stopped to water their horses at a small spring, and Sarah sat tied to a wagon wheel in the shade. Suddenly, Jake let out a startled curse. "What the hell?" "Indians," Pete whispered, and Sarah heard the metallic sound of guns being drawn. "Just one," Morgan said, his voice tense. "On that ridge." Sarah turned her head toward where she thought they were looking, though she could see nothing. But she could hear something new, the sound of a horse picking its way carefully down the rocky slope toward their camp. "He's coming down," Jake said nervously. "What do we do, boss?" "Easy," Morgan replied. "Could be he just wants to trade. Or maybe he's scouting for a war party. Either way, we don't want trouble." The horse's hoofbeats grew closer, and Sarah heard the animal stop just at the edge of their camp. Then came a voice, speaking in accented English. "I come in peace. I wish to trade." The voice was deep and calm, with a musical quality that reminded Sarah of flowing water. Despite her terror, something about it made her feel less afraid. "What kind of trade?" Morgan asked suspiciously. "I have gold," the stranger replied. "I seek to buy the girl." Sarah's heart leaped with hope, then crashed with despair. This was just another buyer, another man who saw her as property to be purchased. "She's not for sale," Morgan lied smoothly. "She's my daughter. We're traveling to California." "Your daughter?" The stranger's voice carried a note of quiet amusement. "Your daughter who is tied to your wagon wheel like a captive animal?" There was a long silence. Sarah could feel the tension in the air like electricity before a storm. "I know what you are," the stranger continued, "and I know what you plan to do with her. I offer fair price, more than you will get at Devil's Canyon." Morgan cursed under his breath. "How much gold?" "Enough to make you rich men. But first, I must see the merchandise." Sarah heard footsteps approaching, and then a shadow fell across her face. Someone knelt down in front of her, and she smelled something clean and earthy, like pine trees and mountain streams. "She is not merchandise," the stranger said quietly, and Sarah realized he was speaking to her, not to the bandits. "She is a person. What is your name?" "Sarah," she whispered, hardly daring to hope that this man might be different from her captors. "Sarah," he repeated, as if tasting the sound of it. "My name is Running Wolf. I am of the Modoc people." He spoke a few words in a language Sarah didn't recognize, then switched back to English. "I told you that everything will be all right. Do you trust me?" Sarah didn't know what to say. This man was a complete stranger, probably planning to buy her for his own purposes. But something in his voice, in the gentle way he spoke her name, made her want to believe him. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "That is wise," Running Wolf said. "Trust should be earned, not given freely." He stood up and walked back toward the bandits. "I will pay you $50 in gold for the girl." Morgan laughed harshly. $50? She's worth 10 times that in California. Perhaps, but California is many miles away, and the trail is dangerous. "I offer gold now, in your hand. No risk, no long journey." "Not enough," Morgan said flatly. "Then I make different offer," Running Wolf replied, and something in his tone made Sarah's skin prickle with anticipation. "You give me the girl freely, and you all live to see another sunset." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah heard the subtle sounds of weapons being readied, leather creaking as men shifted into fighting positions. "That sounds like a threat, Indian," Jake snarled. It is not threat, Running Wolf said calmly. It is promise. You have taken this girl from her family. You plan to sell her like animal. This is not acceptable. There's 6 of us and 1 of you, Morgan pointed out. 7, Running Wolf corrected. You forgot to count the girl. And you are wrong about one thing. I am not alone. As if summoned by his words, Sarah heard the whisper of arrows cutting through air. 3 of the bandits cried out in pain, and she heard weapons clattering to the ground. My brothers are excellent marksmen, Running Wolf said, conversationally. Those arrows were aimed at shoulders and legs. The next ones will not miss vital organs. You're bluffing, Morgan said, but his voice shook with uncertainty. Am I? Jake, how does your shoulder feel? And, Pete, can you still use that arm? Sarah heard Jake cursing and moaning, confirming that Running Wolf was not bluffing at all. What do you want? Morgan asked, the fight gone out of his voice. I want you to untie the girl and ride away. Leave her horse and supplies. Forget you ever saw her. And if we refuse, then you will not leave this place alive. There was another long silence, broken only by Jake's pained groaning and the nervous snorting of horses. Finally, Morgan spoke. Cut her loose, Pete, and gather up the gold we took from those settlers. We're leaving it all here. Boss? Pete sounded confused. Do it. We'll find easier prey somewhere else. Sarah felt hands fumbling with the ropes that bound her to the wagon wheel. As soon as she was free, she heard Running Wolf's voice close to her ear. Can you walk? She nodded, not trusting her voice. He helped her stand, his hands gentle but strong. There is a horse waiting for you, he said. A gentle mare. Do you know how to ride? A little, Sarah managed to whisper. That will be enough. I will lead her. Around them, the bandits were hastily gathering their belongings and mounting their horses. Sarah heard Morgan's voice, tight with suppressed rage. This isn't over, Indian. For your sake, I hope it is, Running Wolf replied evenly. The sound of galloping hooves faded into the distance, leaving Sarah alone with her mysterious rescuer. She waited for him to tell her what he expected in return for saving her, what new form of captivity awaited her. Instead, he simply said, Are you hungry? I have food. And for the first time in 3 days, Sarah allowed herself to hope that her nightmare might finally be over. Sarah sat beside the small fire that Running Wolf had built, still trying to convince herself that her rescue was real and not some cruel dream. The warmth felt good against her face after the cold terror of the past 3 days, and the smell of cooking rabbit made her stomach growl despite her nervousness about what came next. Eat, Running Wolf said gently, pressing something warm into her hands. You need strength. Sarah felt the shape of a tin plate and fumbled for the food. Her hands were shaking so badly that she nearly dropped everything. Here, Running Wolf said, and she felt him move closer. Let me help. I can do it, Sarah said quickly, not wanting to seem more helpless than she already was. I know you can, he replied patiently, but you do not have to prove anything to me. Your hands shake because you have been afraid. This is normal. His matter-of-fact acceptance of her condition surprised her. Most people either pitied her blindness or ignored it completely, but Running Wolf seemed to see it simply as one part of who she was. Why did you help me? Sarah asked as she carefully ate the tender meat. What do you want in return? Running Wolf was quiet for so long that she wondered if he had heard her question. Finally, he spoke. My sister was taken by raiders when she was 16, sold to traders who brought her far from our homeland. I searched for 3 years but never found her. His voice carried an old pain, carefully controlled but still present. When I saw what those men planned for you, I saw her face again. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. I'm sorry about your sister. Her name was Bright Morning, Running Wolf said. She had a laugh like water flowing over stones. She would have been about your age now. The past tense in his words told Sarah everything she needed to know. She reached out instinctively, and her hand found his arm. The muscle tensed under her touch, as if he wasn't used to comfort from strangers. What happened to her? I do not know, but after 7 years, with no word, no trace, I have accepted that she walks the spirit trail now. They sat in silence for a while, sharing the weight of loss and fear. Sarah found herself studying Running Wolf through her other senses. His voice suggested a man in his 20s, and his hands, when he helped her, had been strong but gentle. He moved quietly, even for someone trying to be stealthy. And he spoke English well, though, with the careful precision of someone who had learned it as a second language. Where are we? Sarah asked eventually. 2 days' ride from Devil's Canyon, 3 days from where you were taken. We are in the mountains now, in a place my people call Hidden Valley. Your people won't mind that you brought me here? Running Wolf stirred the fire, and Sarah heard the crackle of fresh wood catching flame. My people are scattered now. The white soldiers came to our lands 5 summers ago. Some of my tribe went to the reservation. Others fled to Canada. I chose a different path. What path? I became a wanderer. I trade with all peoples, white, Mexican, Indian. I go where I choose, live as I choose. It is lonely sometimes, but it is free. Sarah heard something in his voice that she recognized, the sound of someone who had lost everything that mattered. Don't you miss having a home? Home is not a place, Running Wolf said thoughtfully. It is people who care about you. People who know your heart. I have not had that for a long time. The honesty in his words moved Sarah deeply. This man had saved her life, and now he was sharing his deepest losses with her, as if they were old friends. She felt a strange connection to him, as if they understood each other in a way that went beyond words. What will happen to me now? She asked, voicing the fear that had been growing in her mind. That depends on what you want to happen. Sarah frowned. I don't understand. You are free, Running Wolf said simply. You can choose your own path. I can take you back to find your family, if that is what you wish. Or I can help you reach Oregon Territory to wait for them there. Or, he paused, as if uncertain whether to continue. Or what? Or you can stay with me for a while. Learn to live in the wilderness. I could teach you things that might help you survive on your own. The offer surprised Sarah so much that she almost dropped her tin plate. Why would you do that? Because you are stronger than you know. In 3 days with those bandits you watched and listened and learned their ways. You did not break, even when they spoke of terrible things. You have spirit, Sarah. With the right skills, you could live free like me. Go where you choose, depend on no one. The idea was both terrifying and thrilling. Sarah had been protected and sheltered her whole life, first by her parents and then by the small community they had lived with. The thought of being truly independent seemed impossible. I can't see, she said. How could I possibly survive alone in the wilderness? Sight is only one way to understand the world, Running Wolf replied. You already use your other senses better than most people. With training, you could become better at it than someone with perfect vision. You really believe that? I know it. I have met blind hunters among my people who could track deer by scent and sound alone. I have known a blind medicine woman who could identify any plant by touch and smell. The body learns to use what it has when it must. Sarah felt a stirring of something she had never experienced before, the possibility of being truly capable, not just someone to be taken care of. But what about my parents? They must be worried sick. Of course they are. But think about this. If you learn these skills, if you become strong and independent, you will be less of a burden to them when you reunite. You will be able to help protect them instead of always needing protection. The logic was sound, but Sarah still felt torn. How long would this training take? As long as necessary. Maybe months. Maybe longer. There's much to learn. And you would stay with me all that time? Teach me everything? If you wish it, yes. Sarah tried to imagine it, living in the wilderness with this mysterious Modoc man, learning skills she had never dreamed possible. It seemed like something out of a story, too fantastic to be real. I need to think about it, she said finally. Of course. But while you think, let me show you something. Running Wolf stood up, and Sarah heard him moving around the campsite. He returned and knelt beside her. Give me your hands, he said softly. Sarah hesitated, then extended her hands toward him. She felt his fingers, warm and calloused, gently take hold of hers. He guided her hands to touch something rough and flexible. Rope, Sarah said. Yes. Feel how it is twisted. His hands guided hers along the length of rope, showing her the pattern of the weave. Now feel this. He placed different objects in her hands, a piece of bark, a smooth stone, a dried leaf. With each one, he helped her explore the texture, weight, and shape with her fingertips. What am I learning? Sarah asked. To trust your hands to tell you what your eyes cannot. Most people look at things but do not really feel them. You can learn to feel everything. The simple exercise was somehow profound. Sarah realized that she had been using her hands her whole life, but never with this kind of focused attention. Under Running Wolf's guidance, the objects seemed to come alive under her fingertips. Now, he said, close your eyes and listen. They already are closed, Sarah said, confused. No, you keep your eyes open but unseeing. I want you to truly close them, to forget about sight completely and focus only on sound. Sarah did as he instructed, and immediately the world around her seemed to expand. She heard the crackle of the fire more distinctly, the whisper of wind through pine branches, the distant call of a night bird, the soft breathing of their horses. What do you hear? Running Wolf asked. Everything, Sarah whispered in amazement. It's like the sounds are painted in my mind. Yes, and this is only the beginning. Your ears can tell you the size of a room, the mood of a person, the weather that is coming. Your nose can identify people from far away, warn you of danger, guide you to food and water. Your skin can feel changes in air pressure, temperature, even the presence of large objects nearby. As he spoke, Sarah began to understand what he was offering her. Not just survival skills, but a way of experiencing the world that was fuller and richer than what most sighted people ever knew. The bandits, she said suddenly. When they were talking at night, I could tell which ones were lying and which were afraid just by their voices. I thought it was just luck. Not luck. Natural ability that you never learn to trust. I can teach you to develop these gifts until they become as reliable as sight once was. Sarah felt excitement building in her chest. And then I could really take care of myself? Travel alone if I needed to? You could do anything you set your mind to, Running Wolf said with quiet confidence. But what about my parents? They'll never understand. They'll think I'm crazy for choosing this over finding them. Perhaps. Or perhaps they will be proud to see their daughter become strong and independent. Parents worry most about children who cannot care for themselves. Running Wolf had a point, though Sarah wasn't sure her parents would see it that way. They had spent 17 years protecting her from the world, and now she was considering diving into it headfirst with a man they had. If I say yes, she said slowly, how would I know you won't hurt me? I still barely know who you are. You are right to be cautious, Running Wolf replied. Trust must be earned. So I will make you a promise. If you choose to stay and learn, but ever want to leave, I will take you wherever you wish to go immediately. No questions, no arguments. You will never be my prisoner. And you won't expect other things from me? Sarah's cheeks burned as she asked the question. But she had to know. You mean will I force myself on you like those bandits planned? Running Wolf's voice was steady and serious. Never. You have my word of honor. You will learn and train as my student. Nothing more unless you freely choose otherwise. The sincerity in his voice convinced Sarah more than any passionate declaration could have. This was a man who said what he meant and kept his promises. There's something else, she said. I've never been away from my family before. What if I can't do it? What if I'm too weak? Then you will discover that about yourself and choose differently. But I do not think you are weak, Sarah. Weak people do not survive what you have survived with their spirit intact. Sarah thought about the past 3 days, the terror, the despair, the moments when she had wanted to give up but hadn't. Maybe she was stronger than she thought. If I decided to try this, she said carefully, what would we do first? First, you would rest and heal from your ordeal. Then we would begin with simple things. Learning to move safely through the forest, to identify plants and animals by sound and scent, to find food and water. Later would come more advanced skills, tracking, hunting, defending yourself. Defending myself? Sarah's eyes widened. You mean fighting? I mean surviving. Sometimes that requires fighting, but more often it requires avoiding trouble altogether. A person who can move silently and hide effectively rarely needs to fight. The conversation was interrupted by a sound that made both of them freeze, the distant whinny of horses approaching through the forest. The bandits? Sarah whispered, her heart racing. No, Running Wolf said after listening intently. Different horses, different riders. Stay here and keep quiet. Sarah heard him move away from the fire, his footsteps disappearing completely after just a few yards. She sat perfectly still, straining her ears to identify the approaching sounds. There were at least 3 horses, maybe 4, picking their way carefully through the trees. The riders were trying to be quiet, but not succeeding very well. Sarah could hear the creak of leather saddles, the jingle of metal bits, the occasional low murmur of human voices. Then she heard something that made her heart leap. Her father's voice, calling her name softly into the darkness. Sarah? Sarah, if you're out there, please answer us. It's Papa. Tears streaming down her face, Sarah started to call back, then stopped. Running Wolf had told her to keep quiet, and she didn't know if there might be danger. What if the bandits were with her father somehow? What if this was a trap? But then she heard her mother's voice, broken with grief and exhaustion. Please, baby girl, if you can hear us? Sarah couldn't stay silent any longer. Mama? Papa? I'm here. The effect was immediate. The horses broke into a gallop, crashing through the underbrush toward the light of their fire. Sarah stood up, her heart pounding with joy and relief. Sarah! Her father's voice was closer now, and she could hear him dismounting from his horse. But before he could reach her, Running Wolf's voice cut through the night, speaking in the Modoc language. Sarah heard her father stop abruptly. Who's there? Her father called out, and Sarah could hear the fear in his voice. Running Wolf stepped into the circle of firelight, and Sarah sensed rather than saw him raise his hands peacefully. "I am the one who rescued your daughter," he said calmly. "She is safe and unharmed." "Sarah," her mother called out. "Baby, are you all right?" "I'm fine, Mama." Sarah called back. "This man saved me from the bandits. He's been taking care of me." There was a moment of tense silence. Then her father spoke again, his voice tight with emotion and suspicion. "Step away from my daughter, Indian." "Papa, no," Sarah said quickly. "He's not dangerous. He saved my life." But she could feel the tension crackling in the air between the two men, and she realized that her moment of decision had arrived much sooner than expected. Her family was here, ready to take her home to safety and the familiar life she had always known. But they were also here to take her away from the possibility of becoming someone entirely new, someone strong and independent and free. Running Wolf spoke quietly, his voice carrying clearly to everyone present. "Your daughter must choose for herself what path she will take. I have offered to teach her skills that would allow her to live independently. But the choice is hers alone." "What choice?" her father demanded. "She's coming home with us where she belongs." Sarah felt the weight of everyone's expectations pressing down on her. Her parents' love and fear, Running Wolf's quiet confidence, her own desperate longing for both safety and freedom. In that moment, standing between her old life and a new one she could barely imagine, Sarah realized that whatever she decided would change everything forever, and she still didn't know what choice she was going to make. Sarah stood frozen between two worlds, feeling the weight of the most important decision of her life pressing down on her shoulders. Her parents waited on one side, their love and fear palpable in the mountain air. Running Wolf stood quietly nearby, offering no pressure, simply waiting for her choice. The crackling fire seemed unnaturally loud in the tense silence. "Sarah, come here right now," her mother said, her voice breaking with emotion. "We've been so worried. We thought we'd lost you forever." "You didn't lose me, Mama," Sarah said softly. "I'm right here." "Then come home with us where you belong," her father added, his voice gentle but firm. "This isn't your world, sweetheart. These mountains, this wilderness life, it's too dangerous for someone like you." The phrase, "someone like you," hit Sarah like a physical blow. Someone like her, someone blind, someone weak, someone who needed constant protection and care. For 17 years, she had accepted that definition of herself, but now it felt like a cage that was far too small. "What if I don't want to be someone like me anymore?" Sarah asked quietly. Her father's sharp intake of breath told her that her words had shocked him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if I want to be someone strong? Someone who can take care of herself and even help take care of other people." "Sarah, honey," her mother said gently, "you are strong. You've survived something terrible, and we're so proud of how brave you've been. But that doesn't mean you need to stay out here in the wilderness with a stranger." "He's not a stranger anymore," Sarah said. "His name is Running Wolf, and he saved my life when he didn't have to. He could have ridden away and left me to die, but he didn't. We're grateful for that," her father said stiffly, "more grateful than we can ever express. But gratitude doesn't mean you owe him your life." "I don't owe him anything," Sarah replied. "But maybe I owe myself the chance to find out what I'm truly capable of." Running Wolf spoke for the first time since her parents had arrived. "Sarah, your parents love you deeply. They have traveled far and risked much to find you. This love is precious and rare." For a moment, Sarah thought he was trying to convince her to go with them. Then he continued, "But love that seeks to protect by limiting is like a beautiful bird kept in a cage. The bird stays safe, but it never learns to truly fly." "Don't you dare," her father said angrily. "Don't you dare stand there and lecture us about how to love our daughter. You don't know what it's like to watch your child struggle with blindness every day, to see her frustrated and hurt when she can't do the things other children can do." "You are right," Running Wolf said calmly. "I do not know that pain, but I know what it is like to have abilities that others cannot see, to be judged by what I lack instead of what I possess." Sarah felt something shift in her understanding. "Papa, do you remember when I was little and I wanted to learn to ride horses?" "But Sarah, you said it was too dangerous for someone who couldn't see, and when I wanted to learn to cook over an open fire like the other girls, you said the same thing. And when I asked if I could help with the harvest, or learn to shoot, or do any of the things that would make me useful to our family," her father was quiet for a long moment. "We were trying to protect you." "I know," Sarah said, her voice full of love and sadness, "but protecting me from everything also protected me from becoming everything I could be." Her mother started to cry softly. "We just wanted you to be safe and happy." "I know, Mama. And I love you both so much for that, but I'm not happy being helpless. I want to be someone who can protect others instead of always needing protection." It's not that simple, her father argued. This man is filling your head with impossible dreams. A blind person can't live alone in the wilderness. It's just not realistic. Why not? Sarah asked. Because you've never seen it done? Because the blind people you know live quietly in towns and depend on others for everything they need? Running Wolf spoke again, his voice thoughtful. In my travels, I have met many different peoples with many different ways of living. Among the Blackfoot, there is a blind warrior woman named Seas in Darkness who has counted more coup than most sighted braves. The Cheyenne have a blind medicine man who can identify healing plants from 20 paces away by their scent. These things seem impossible only if you have never seen them. Those are stories, Sarah's father said dismissively. Legends. They are people, Running Wolf replied firmly. People who were given the chance to develop their gifts instead of being told they were too weak to try. Sarah felt tears streaming down her cheeks. She loved her parents desperately, but she was beginning to understand that their love, however well-intentioned, had been keeping her from discovering who she really was. Papa, she said through her tears, what if I stayed for just a little while? What if I learned some basic skills and then came to find you in Oregon? I would be stronger, more capable of helping with our new life there. Absolutely not, her father said immediately. We're not leaving you alone in the mountains with a man we don't know. Then stay, Sarah said suddenly. Both of you, learn with me. The suggestion seemed to shock everyone into silence. Sarah rushed on before anyone could object. We could all learn wilderness skills together. Papa, you're always saying how hard it's going to be to build a homestead in Oregon. Wouldn't it help if we all knew how to hunt and track and find food in the wild? And Mama, think of all the medicinal plants we could learn about. We could be the most self-sufficient family in the territory. Sarah heard her parents exchanging glances, or at least what sounded like a meaningful silence between them. Sarah, her mother said carefully, it's not that simple. We have responsibilities. The wagon train is waiting for us. We have supplies and equipment that other families are counting on. The wagon train left yesterday, Running Wolf said quietly. What? Sarah's father's voice was sharp with alarm. They waited 2 days for you to return. When you did not come back, they voted to continue west. The season grows late, and they feared being caught in the mountains when winter comes. Sarah heard her father curse under his breath. This changed everything. Without the protection and resources of the wagon train, her parents would have a much harder time reaching Oregon on their own. We'll catch up to them, her father said. But he didn't sound convinced. Maybe, Running Wolf agreed, but it would be difficult with winter coming. The high passes may already be closed by snow. What are you suggesting? Sarah's mother asked. I am suggesting nothing. I am only sharing what I know of these mountains and this season. You must make your own choices. Sarah realized that Running Wolf was giving her family the same gift he had given her, information without pressure, truth without manipulation. He was letting them see their situation clearly and decide for themselves what to do. There's a trading post 2 days north of here, Running Wolf continued, Fort Klamath. You could spend the winter there, then continue to Oregon in the spring when the passes are clear. A whole winter in some frontier trading post? Sarah's mother sounded horrified. Or, Running Wolf said gently, you could spend the winter learning skills that would make your journey safer and your new life easier. I know places in these mountains where we could build a good shelter, places with fresh water and game nearby, places where we could all survive comfortably until spring. Sarah held her breath, hardly daring to hope that her parents might consider such an unconventional option. You're talking about living like Indians, her father said, and Sarah winced at the way he said it. I am talking about living like human beings who understand how to work with the natural world instead of fighting against it, Running Wolf replied without offense. But yes, some of these skills my people have used for many generations. I don't know, Sarah's mother said uncertainly. It seems so different, Sarah finished for her. It seems different from what we planned. But Mama, nothing has gone according to plan since we left home. Maybe it's time to try a different kind of plan. What if it doesn't work? Her father asked. What if we're not strong enough or smart enough to survive out here? Then you will learn that about yourselves and choose differently, Running Wolf said, echoing the words he had spoken to Sarah earlier. But you might also discover strengths you never knew you possessed. Sarah stepped forward, reaching for her parents. She felt their hands take hers, warm and familiar and full of love. Please, she said softly. I'm not asking you to give up on Oregon forever. I'm just asking for one winter to learn who I can become. And I'm asking you to learn with me, so we can all become stronger together. She felt her parents' hands tighten around hers, and she could sense the internal struggle they were fighting. Everything they had been taught about safety and proper behavior was at war with their love for their daughter and their growing understanding of their situation. If we agreed to this, her mother said slowly, what would it actually involve? What would we be learning? Running Wolf's voice warmed slightly, as if he sensed their genuine interest. Many things. How to build shelters that stay warm in winter. How to find and preserve food when game is scarce. How to make tools and weapons from materials the forest provides. How to read weather signs and animal behavior. How to move quietly and safely through dangerous terrain. And Sarah would learn all of this too? Her father asked. Sarah would learn whatever she was capable of learning. Some things might be difficult for her, others might be easier than for a sighted person. We would discover together what works and what does not. Sarah felt a spark of hope at the carefully neutral way he spoke about her abilities. Not dismissive, not overly encouraging, just honest. What about when winter ends? Her mother asked. What then? Then you would be free to continue to Oregon, if that is still your desire. Number 5. Herding for Pastor Ben's suit. You would travel with skills and knowledge that would make your homesteading much easier. And Sarah would travel with the confidence that comes from knowing she can take care of herself in any situation. The silence stretched out as Sarah's parents considered this unexpected opportunity. Finally, her father spoke. Sarah, is this really what you want? To spend a winter in the mountains, learning these skills? Yes, Papa, more than anything. And you really believe this man can teach us what we need to know? Sarah turned toward Running Wolf, though she still couldn't see him. Running Wolf, will you tell my parents about the bandits? How you defeated 6 armed men? 7, Running Wolf corrected. You were the 7th person in their camp, and you proved to be on the right side when it mattered. Sarah heard her father's sharp intake of breath. You fought 7 men alone? I had help from 2 friends with bows, but yes, we faced 7 enemies and defeated them without killing anyone. This is possible when you understand the land, when you can move unseen and strike from unexpected directions. And you could teach us these things? I could teach you many things. Whether you could learn them, that would depend on your willingness to try, and your ability to see the world in new ways. Sarah's mother spoke up suddenly. What about supplies? Food, blankets, tools? We lost almost everything to those bandits. The bandits left everything they stole from your wagon train, Running Wolf replied. It is all here, along with their horses and weapons. You have more supplies now than when you were taken. This seemed to surprise Sarah's parents into silence. Finally, her father spoke. You're saying we could survive a winter in the mountains using our own supplies that you recovered from the bandits? Yes. And by spring, you would know how to resupply yourselves from the land itself. Sarah could feel her parents wavering, could sense them beginning to see this impossible option as merely improbable, then as actually possible. There's one more thing, her mother said quietly. If we agree to this, if we spend a winter learning these skills with you, what happens to Sarah in the spring? Does she come with us to Oregon, or does she stay with you? It was the question Sarah had been dreading. Running Wolf was quiet for a long moment before answering. That will be Sarah's choice to make, but I hope that by spring you will trust her judgment enough to accept whatever she decides. Sarah felt her heart racing. The idea that she might actually have a real choice about her future, that her parents might actually trust her to make that choice, seemed almost too wonderful to believe. Sarah, her father said slowly, if we do this thing, if we all learn these skills together, do you promise to seriously consider coming to Oregon with us in the spring? I promise to consider it seriously, Sarah said, but Papa, you have to promise something too. What? You have to promise that if I prove I can take care of myself, if I become strong and capable, you'll seriously consider letting me make my own choice about my future. Another long silence. Then her father sighed deeply. That's a hard promise for a father to make. I know, Sarah said gently. But it's a necessary one if I'm ever going to grow up. All right, he said finally. I promise. Sarah felt her mother's hand squeeze hers. I promise too, sweetheart, but you have to understand how hard this is for us. I do understand, Mama, and I love you both for being willing to try something so different just to give me this chance. Running Wolf spoke into the emotional silence that followed. The decision is made. Then, you will spend the winter learning? The decision is made, Sarah's father said, and Sarah could hear both fear and determination in his voice. Running Wolf moved closer, and Sarah felt him kneel beside their little group. Then let me begin your first lesson now. Give me your hands, all of you. Sarah felt her parents hesitate, then slowly extend their hands toward the Modoc man who was about to change all their lives. Feel, Running Wolf said, placing their hands on a... This is from a cedar tree. The texture tells you it is good for starting fires even when wet. The scent tells you it will burn clean and bright. Your hands can learn to read the forest, like others read books. As Sarah felt the rough bark under her fingers, guided by Running Wolf's patient hands, she realized that this moment was the true beginning of everything, not her rescue from the bandits, not even her decision to stay, but this moment when her family committed to learning together, to becoming something new together. For the first time since the bandits had taken her, Sarah allowed herself to believe that her future might hold possibilities she had never dared to dream of. And as Running Wolf began to teach them the first secrets of survival in the wilderness, Sarah felt something she had never experienced before: the deep satisfaction of learning skills that would make her strong instead of just safe. The winter ahead would be hard, she knew. There would be moments of doubt and fear and failure. But there would also be moments of discovery and growth and triumph. And at the end of it, she would finally know who Sarah really was when she was free to be everything she was capable of becoming. The fire crackled warmly as the four unlikely companions began their first lesson together, and somewhere in the darkness beyond the firelight, the mountains seemed to whisper their approval of this new beginning.